Ho! What's up, you little freaks? Deltarune Chapters 3 and 4 just came out. I played them, you most likely played them, and as a result, we are changed people. These chapters were such a surprise in the best way possible, and really made it clear that we did not know shit about this game 2 weeks ago. And I'm not just talking about the major theories that were disproven, but the very structure of the game, the things we assumed were no-brainers, turned out not to be true at all. It's a completely new world out there. So I just wanted to take some time and talk with you guys about it. I haven't written a script for this video, I'm just sort of gonna ramble at my microphone for a while, so without further ado, let's just talk. So I wanted to start with my thoughts on Chapter 3, and how funny it is that 5 minutes into this fucking chapter, Ralsei looks at the camera and says, "Cammy Boy G, I am a Darkner." In all seriousness, I really don't think my Ralsei theory has suffered that much as a result of these chapters. I still think it's pretty solid, but I'm going to save the section for where I think my theories stand now in the current zeitgeist till the end of the video. But what I love so much about the conversation that Ralsei and Suzy have at the beginning of Chapter 3 is that it takes Suzy to a place that a lot of us didn't think she would go until, like, the end game. The fact that Suzy knows what Darkners are now and there's no question about it at this point in the narrative is so refreshing. I think a lot of us were under the assumption that Suzy finally learning that, you know, all of her Darkner friends weren't real and none of the adventures were real was going to be sort of an endgame revelation for Suzy, and it would be devastating for her. Like, we thought it was an arc that would build up to the end, and it's so nice that this reveal has gotten out of the way, and so Suzy doesn't feel like a dumbass for the sake of the narrative anymore. Having her face this revelation this early on is going to leave so much more room for her character to develop over the course of the game, and it already has, especially in Chapter 4, in regards to her relationship with the Darkners and the Prophecy. And also, the way it digs into Ralsei at the core of who he is really fantastic as well. We're really starting to delve into his lack of self-worth and his sense of self, his own personality and opinions are starting to bud. Anyway, in the middle of this, like, beautiful character moment that Ralsei and Suzy have together, that cutscene plays where Ralsei is explaining how Darkners are really objects, and out of fucking nowhere, again, first 5 minutes in the chapter, Friend appears on screen. But Friend isn't just a normal cat, it's fucking Endogony from Undertale. I still don't know what to make of this, and I'm so flabbergasted by it, I can't stop thinking about it. And it's so bizarre to me how we don't have any concrete theories or answers about why this thing was on screen. Friend appears as it's similarly shaped to Endogony. It has 5 legs with cat silhouettes that make up the in-between of the legs, very similar to Endogony, but it's black instead of white. And it appears to be a cat instead of a dog. Though the strange thing is, they both have pointy ears, so they're more similar than different in my opinion. I think the silhouette's similar enough that I think there's sort of a question to be asked if they're the same thing or if they're different. But I think the other hints that Friend is a cat probably lean toward them being different things. But even so, the comparison between them is insane. Because now we have to ask the question, how is Friend related to Endogony? Does Friend have something to do with determination experiments, or maybe like darkness experiments? Are they the Deltarune equivalent of Endogony in that they are several cats put together somehow using darkness? It's baffling. It's baffling. And then he fucking jump scares you. And then of course we get the introduction of Tenna. After all the build-up to finally seeing Tenna on screen, it felt almost impossible that we could be surprised by anything Toby showed us. But one thing I never saw any fanworks depict or suggest is that Tenna would be a pre-rendered 3D model. Like, straight out of fucking Donkey Kong Country. And I absolutely love the style of Tenna. He's the most expressive sprite in Deltarune by a country mile. He is so funny. I love the fucking word art that appears in his text. One of the most fascinating things about Tenna is that he is by far the most sympathetic main antagonist we've had so far. Throughout all of Chapter 3, I feel like you're expecting Tenna to have some sort of heel turn, and I mean, to his credit, he does have a turn where he goes aggro and we need to fight him eventually, but it's not because he wants control or because he wants power. It's just because he is lonely and the family has left him alone for so many years and he just misses them. He misses Chris and Toriel and the rest of the Dreamers. I absolutely love Tenna. And God, I hope there's a good payoff for giving him to Mettaton, because I miss having Tenna in my castle town. I want to see his stupid VR chat dance spray dancing in my castle town. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So after the Tenna introduction, you get thrown into this video game segment where Chris, Susie, and Ralsei all sit on the couch and play like an NES-style Deltarune. And this segment, I adore it so much. And the work that must have gone into this segment must have been so huge. Like, of course, Chapter 3 took so much more time than the other chapters did to develop, because the interplay between Chris, Susie, and Ralsei controlling the characters on screen while still having dialogue off-screen and having different scenarios that the characters are doing shit in, it's hard to explain all in one go like that, but it is so well crafted. Susie and Ralsei feel like they're reacting to everything happening on screen perfectly. Tenna, again, on the couch is great. Every line of his is great. Pushing buddies. Susie's like, I can't figure out how to kill this guy. And Tenna's like, get in line, kid. I really can't praise the video game segments enough. They're the last thing I expected, and I love them. I especially love the part where Susie and Ralsei and Chris all switch controllers. There's so many good jokes in that bit, and again, more Ralsei character development about him developing his own sense of self. And I also wanted to talk about the green room segments. First of all, Ramb. What a fucking fascinating character. So if you weren't privy to this information, Ramb was actually teased a few weeks before the chapters dropped when the whole Spamton Sweepstakes 2 happened. A bunch of new teasers were dropped on the Spamton Sweepstakes website. And my dumb ass, because there were two links on the website, one to a page called Ramb and one to a page called Rom, I thought that Ramb and Rom were two separate characters. So I thought Ramb was the guy in front and then Rom was the guy in back in the S-Rank room. So when I went on Twitter after beating the game and I saw so much love for Ramb, I was like, Ramb didn't do anything. What are you guys talking about? But they were the same guy. Ramb and Rom are just Ramb. And Rom is just a misspelling of Ramb in one of the quiz segments later on. So that was funny, that whole misunderstanding. But anyways, I love Ramb. I don't quite understand his design. It's like he has purple hair that also is dog ears. And I guess he's a power strip that Chris and Azrael stole from the library. But also the backstory that Ramb is able to give you is so fascinating. He gives us the most complete look into how Darkner backstories work that I think we've seen up to this point. And he talks about how Chris and that girl, I assume that girl is Noelle. I think you could also stretch it to mean Des, but I frankly just think that Chris and Noelle are more likely to be the ones playing make-believe together than Chris and Des. But he said that Chris and Noelle would play make-believe with a bunch of stuff in the living room, and Chris would have King on their side, and Noelle would have Queen, and Tenna would be there in the back, and Ramb was there. And that confirms, first of all, why Queen and King know each other, but also that all of these Darkners used to be a part of a make-believe game that Chris and Noelle used to play with each other. Like, all of these Darkners spawned from a game that Chris and Noelle would play as children, which is so interesting, and I feel like a lot of people aren't talking about that yet. It makes you call further into question the nature of Darkners, because Ralsei is really pushing this whole Darkners don't matter and you should be able to forget about us mindset, and of course we don't want that to be true. We want Ralsei to be real and Lancer and everyone else. But my question is now, did these characters and personalities actually spawn from Chris and Noelle's imagination? Do they have that much influence over their personalities and who they are? And another thing Ramb does is strengthen my Ralsei theory. And again, I'll talk more about this later, but he makes it pretty clear that the Darkners in Chris's house know each other, and they've known each other for a very long time, which makes it all the more suspicious why, if Ralsei is Chris's horn headband or a green crayon, why doesn't anyone know who Ralsei is in Chris's house? But anyways, the water cooler fight is also fucking insane. The mini-games are great. Actually, the mini-games aren't great. I fucking hate Susie Zilla. Susie Zilla can suck my ass. I just don't know how to play it. I played it for 2 hours trying to get an S rank and I just decided to stop. Oh, but the music minigame is so good. Raise Up Your Bat is so fucking goated, and it's so fascinating how it gives us a look into Dess's personality, I think. If the baseball bat connection wasn't obvious already, there are also posters in Dess's room for band concerts that never happened, and a lot of people are inferring that Raise Up Your Bat was actually a song written by Dess. For her band Blood Crushers 3, which was apparently a band that Noelle was listening to during the sweepstakes on her blog. That's a whole can of worms, but still, Raise Up Your Bat, fantastic song, and a really fascinating to look into what I think Dess's personality was like. And the fucking when the Lost Girl part came in for the first time, I was weeping. I wasn't weeping, I don't weep, but, you know. I was mentally weeping for sure. So after all the video game segments in the green room, you get to Toriel. And this is where the first really big major shakeup happened, at least in my mind, where I realized we aren't going to be getting Dark World tag-alongs in the same way that we thought we were going to get them. Everyone assumed that Toriel would be one of the party members this chapter, and that Undyne would end up showing up too, as well as Nefstablook probably. Toriel sleeps the entire time, and Undyne appears for 10 seconds at the end. And I think a lot of people are bummed about that. Rightfully so. I think when you believe something for that long, it ends up not being true. I think a lot of people can't help but be disappointed. I personally never really thought we were going to get any other additional party members besides Noelle, so I'm not that broken up about it. Oh, and so before I move on to the ending of the chapter, let's talk about the fucking S-rank minigames, because this shit is insane. I thought I had accidentally stumbled onto the weird route the first time I was playing it. It was that scary. Ramb lets you into the back room when you get an S rank, and there's this strange video game console that you can't play without a controller. But when you try to exit the room, someone just leaves a controller on the ground for you with pink and yellow buttons, and of course it's fucking pink and yellow, more friend shit happening. We still, despite all the new information about Friend, we still know truly fucking nothing about Friend. But anyhow, we get to play this game that Tenna altered for us, for all of us to play, but we get to play the original version of it, where we're controlling Chris with a sword in this version of the game, and there are a lot of monsters roaming around, and we just have to take them all out. And these games start to feel like you're playing like a fictionalization of the Weird Route. The Weird Route, or even Undertale's Genocide Route, which is fascinating, because all the monsters you're killing look similar to Undertale characters. You have a yellow lizard, a blue fish. You have these white, like, demon-looking guys, but their shape is exactly like Toriel's head. And then a yellow one of those demon guys who's throwing red spears like Asgore, and flowers. See, this is why I think it's actually connected to Undertale Genocide, because most of these characters appear in Deltarune, but one who super does not is Flowey. And these flowers on this map look exactly like Flowey, like the same petal arrangement, which is so fascinating. Again, I don't know what to make of this, I just know that that's what I think. But eventually, once you kill enough monsters, you get to kill the bird. And that's the first indication that this is also connected to the Weird Route, because I mean, I don't need to explain it. You fucking kill Birdly in the Weird Route. Or, actually, I was gonna start talking about the Weird Route, but let's save the Weird Route for, like, its own section later on. But basically, you kill all the monsters on that map, and you can finally get the Ice Key. And the Ice Palace was something that we thought we wouldn't be seeing until the end of the game. Again, the Ice Palace is something that was teased by the Spamton Sweepstakes. It was really just a blue screen with white blocks on it. Like, we had no idea what it was, but, you know, scary, obscure ice-related shit, obviously that's endgame Weird Route stuff. But it's in Chapter 3. So during the second video game board, if you try and take the raft to the top of the map, Tenna will stop you and say that we're not allowed to go up there. But if you go up there during the backstage version of the game, you can go into the Ice Palace. And you're killing more monsters in there, but what's more is you get a character in a white robe that I think has to represent Noelle, who allows you to shoot ice at enemies and destroy them better. But you use the Ice Mage character to progress further in the game, and then eventually you have to kill her with the text, "She was used up," which is so scary and so fascinating. It makes it seem like Noelle is going to be expendable in the Weird Route somehow. Like, once you're done using her, you discard her. Things being discarded has always been a pretty reoccurring subject in these games, so Noelle being one of those discarded things is pretty disconcerting. And of course you get the bunker key. Or, no, not the bunker. The shelter key. I'm gonna have to I'm gonna have to like rearrange my brain to start saying fuck. I'm gonna have to start rearranging my brain to say shelter instead of bunker, because the game is finally talking about that thing, and it's using the word shelter. And I can't remember if this is where it happens or not, but also at a point it says you were used up. After the white mage gets used up, it says you were used up, which is even scarier. That implies that after Noelle's done being used, maybe Chris is gonna be done being used as well at some point in the weird route. But the third instance of the mantle game is where things get fucking nuts. This is where you make Chris walk into the bunker. And you really have to make them. They're resisting the whole time you try to make them go in. But they go in and you encounter this thing that the fandom has been calling Eram. E-R-A-M, because the soundtrack that plays when you're first meeting this thing is Eram. The nature of this thing is so unknown at this point. It has a connection to Friend, apparently. Some people are speculating that it is Friend, because it summons Friend during its fights. But it itself is sort of like well, let's back up a little bit. You're fighting this thing, Eram, to get the Shadow Mantle, which we've known for a very long time now, that Sham says we're going to need the Shadow Mantle to get the third Shadow Crystal, i.e. to beat the Chapter 3 secret boss. But this thing not only does it have a connection to Friend, but it's teasing Chris about wanting to collect the Shadow Crystals. And to be honest, I gotta take the L on this one, because I honestly thought that the Shadow Crystals were not gonna be plot important. I thought they were essentially just like a physical way to track which secret bosses you've beaten, so you could keep track of it across different profiles and stuff. But no, these Shadow Crystals are plot important as shit. And it starts teasing Chris about how they're having fun collecting them. And anyways, this fight is hard as hell. Because it's so different from the rest of Deltarune's gameplay, I actually struggled on it for quite some time. But once you beat this boss is where it gets fucking crazy. The boss leaves the Shadow Mantle in a chest that your character in the game can't reach, so you have to walk outside of the screen. You, in the little pixelated Chris on the screen, exit the screen and start approaching Chris, and Chris starts backing up, and God, it's such an intense image, so horrifying. And I think it sort of establishes a pattern that we're seeing with collecting the Shadow Crystals. In a lot of ways, we are putting Chris through it when we're collecting these Shadow Crystals. The encounters with Spamton and Jevil, they both really emphasize how trapped and not free Chris is. You know, freedom is obviously the big theme with those two. Chris especially is really perturbed after the Spamton fight, after Spamton's strings are cut and he collapses. Now more than ever, if you want to have the Chapter 3 Shadow Crystal, you need to do this to Chris. You need to force them into the bunker and have them confront you as the little sprite version of them. And it's honestly, it's uncomfortable. But anyways, so much strangeness. I mean, we already knew that Chris had some sort of encounter with the shelter when they were a child, but this only emphasizes that more and also connects a Friend to the shelter. But anyways, moving back to the main game at hand, the segment that comes after all the game boards is so fucking good. The segment where you're moving through the TV studio and recruiting all the enemies and making everyone quit Tenna's company. The song that plays during this part, TV World. Best fucking song in Chapter 3. I know people are hyping up It's TV Time, Tenna's boss theme, but TV World is so good. And the rules fight is so fucking funny. The rules, God, I feel like I didn't appreciate Rules enough until now. Like, I knew he was a funny guy, but like, I didn't know that his fight would be the peak of comedy in this chapter. Holy shit. Him being in a throuple with La Nina and El Nina and fucking directing their attacks with a laser pointer. God, every time you think that Toby Fox can't possibly innovate a battle in a way that you'd never expect, he does it again. It's like clockwork. And then finally we get to the end of the chapter. The Tenna boss fight is so good. It's like playing WarioWare. I'm a big WarioWare fan. I have been ever since I was a kid. And getting to switch between all these mini games while fighting him, it's the perfect way to encapsulate the whole vibe of this chapter and also innovate on the battle system in a way that I never would have expected. Because fighting Queen in Chapter 2, You're like, this isn't like a unique soul mode or anything like the bosses in Undertale had. It's just, we're playing a different game now. It's Punch-Out. So like, how is this going to be expanded upon in future chapters? And I think basically playing WarioWare in Tenna's boss fight is one of the best directions it could have possibly gone in. And It's TV Time, the song that plays, is also fucking phenomenal. Tenna's a fascinating character to me because for a while I feel like I didn't quite get him, because in a lot of ways he felt like an extension of Spamton. You know, he talks in a showmanly manner. He has that big pointy white nose. He even shares a lot of musical motifs with Spamton. And I think I thought this because Spamton has held such an important place in the community for so long, for almost 5 years now. So when a character comes in with all these connections to Spamton, he feels like an extension of Spamton. But what I had to realize is that if these chapters all came out at the same time like originally intended, it would feel the opposite. Like, Spamton would feel like foreshadowing of Tenna. And I think that's what was holding me back from really loving Tenna until now, because I didn't understand that. I thought it was like more Spamton, but Spamton was just our first taste of Tenna. And Hey Every, the it was never Spamton's motif in the first place. That is Tenna's motif, to a T. It's Mr. Antenna's TV time, but it's just missing the time. So that's why Hey Every is everywhere in Chapter 3, because that's fucking Tenna's song. And he stole it, like he broke, and he fucking, and like he stole Tenna's heart. The Spamton Tenna story is also fascinating. I'm honestly not super knowledgeable on it right now, but it seems like it's unclear to me if Tenna was the person who was giving Spamton success on the phone, or if we're still blaming Gaster for that, or what. But clearly they had a partnership and it didn't end well. Oh god, and the cutscene where they interact is so strange. It felt like watching a fan animation, to be honest. Like, maybe I'll warm up to it eventually, I don't know. But let's get serious for a second. I do feel like it's a little deflating to have Spamton actually just come out of your pocket and regain his regular form, because to me it felt like there was a sort of significance to the secret bosses sort of giving up their physical form to become items for you. Like, it felt meaningful in a way, and the fact that they can just go back to being their normal selves is kind of, I won't say disappointing, but it does make the resolution to their fights less meaningful in my mind, less cogent. Not to say the cutscene isn't funny though. But anyway, after the Tenna fight, I could not believe my fucking mind. Out of nowhere, the goddamn Roaring Knight appears. Don't talk to me about Seven Knights Theory, okay? I'm still mourning. Toby took Seven Knights Theory out back and shot it in the back of the head. I'm fine. I just need a little bit more time to process things. But the Roaring Knight's appearance was one of the best fucking moments in this entire game. How insane. How cool. And the appearance is fucking... The Roaring Knight has deer horns. And now the question isn't who is the knight with every single person in town on the suspect list. It's now, is it Des or is it Carol? Because Des has a baseball bat and the knight's sword looks an awful lot like a baseball bat, but Carol has a black katana in her house, which also could be the knight's sword. I'm on the Des side of things, I think, but I think there's room for both. I think a lot of people are leaning a little too hard into Des, and I think there's still room to find out. But I am on Team Des at the moment. In the music, Black Knife. It's fucking... Oh. And I think if you're not aware, the knight fight is also the secret boss, air quotes, of this chapter. Because it appears to be a cutscene boss, you know, like a boss that you lose automatically to and then the story progresses. But has there ever been a game before where you encounter a cutscene boss, but then if you go back and fight the cutscene boss again, it'll let you retry? That is such a cool subversion of that trope, and I don't know if it's appeared anywhere else, but of course it would come from Toby's mind, right? The knight is so fucking cool, dude. It's just so fucking cool. And then it takes Undyne to the bunker. It tries to take Toriel to not the bunker, the shelter. It tries to take Toriel, but it ends up taking Undyne to the shelter. And Chris and Susie find out that there is a code to get in the shelter. One with a Christmas tree, one with a cop's badge, and one with the Deltarune next to it. And that is so fascinating because Susie starts speculating on like who could have a connection to the church and the cops and to the holidays. And I don't know about you guys, but my mind went to Asgore. And there's more about Asgore to talk about that we'll get to later. By the way, since I mentioned Asgore, I just want to point out, despite everything I got wrong in the Seven Knights videos, I got one bizarrely specific thing correct. And that's the fact that I theorized that Toby cut the intro where we would see the silhouette of the knight because the knight's horns would give away who they were. And in that video, I suggested that Asgore's horns would have given away the knight's identity, but in fact, the fucking deer horns would have given away the knight's identity. So funny how that worked out. But anyways, Susie walks off screen, leaving Chris alone with the bunker there at the end, and then the bunker opens for Chris. So it seems like Chris is working with the knight. And that's not the only reason why. There's also the fact that when you defeat the knight in battle, after the knight takes out Susie and Ralsei with one fell swoop each, the knight doesn't take out Chris. The knight lays their sword on their shoulder, and it gets them to kneel for them. There's that, and the fact that Chris will also kneel to them when they're down in battle. So it appears that Chris is working with the knight, but also that's not the only allegiance Chris has. So chapter 3 overall, so different from the chapters we've had before, and it was really the first indication that nothing we thought we knew about this game was correct. And chapter 3 alone disproves so many things we thought to be true. First of all, chess theory out the fucking window. I think a lot of people, including me, were in denial about chess theory because Tenna was so obviously going to be the big boss of chapter 3, but we were all trying to find ways where somehow Rook could actually be the boss, like if Rook was part of Tenna's name, or if Rook was like someone Tenna answers to. But no, there's no Rook. Chess theory just isn't real. But there's also the fact that this whole time we've just been taking for granted the fact that both secret bosses have been these discarded objects that went crazy, presumably because of the influence of Gaster. There are two things that could be considered secret bosses in this chapter, and neither one of them fit that criteria. Aram and the Roaring Knight are completely unique. They're unlike anything we've faced so far, and that's so fascinating to me because there's going to continue being secret bosses in future chapters, and we don't know what the hell they're going to be. We don't even have a way to start guessing. And of course, encountering the Roaring Knight in chapter 3 is so much earlier than anyone thought we were going to see them. I think a lot of people were thinking chapter 5 earliest, right, because of chess theory, but a lot of people were also thinking like the night is endgame, right? Like chapter 6, 7, when shit starts to really go down. But that's not even the last thing that we thought was going to happen in the endgame that happens in these chapters. Chapter 3 overall, so fun, so funny, great music. It's like the perfect reprieve before things start really getting serious in this game, and I really appreciate it a lot for that. It's such a fun time. But then chapter 4 starts, and chapter 4 is Deltarune's best chapter, hands down. I was blown away by every aspect of it, really. There's nothing about chapter 4 that I didn't like. First of all of the Chris and Susie moments in the intro Light World portion are so good. I love the developing friendship between Chris and Susie, and seeing them connect so much is also really one of the biggest indicators that whatever Chris is doing with the knight and Carol and whatever, that Chris is still a lonely teenager and a character we should care about, because their connection with Susie is so it's the best. It's the best relationship in the game. I'm saying it right now. I'm saying it. One revelation that comes on early in chapter 4 that I feel like a lot of people aren't talking about as much as I would expect them to is the fact that the prophecy is the whole town's religion. I think a lot of us were operating under the assumption that the prophecy is something that Gaster gave directly to Ralsei and no one else knows it, but now we know that the prophecy is common knowledge, which is really interesting. Really, the only reason we didn't know that already is because Chris doesn't talk and Susie doesn't go to church. But everyone else, basically everyone else in town, should know what the prophecy is, and by extension I think most if not all Darkners do as well. Which reminds me, there's that line from Lancer in chapter 1, the one where he says that he's the pointy-headed kid from the prophecy. And there's always been discourse around that line, questioning if he really does know the prophecy or if it's just a meta joke and we shouldn't pay much attention to it. But now we know that Lancer literally does appear in the prophecy, as small of a part as he does play, saying toothpaste and then boy. He's in that thing. But anyways, I'm skipping ahead too far. The reveal of Ralsei's room in Castletown is so heartbreaking and so good. And again, we are chipping away at Ralsei's lack of self-worth and his refusal to acknowledge his growing personhood, his identity. And seeing Susie at every single opportunity push back against that and insist that Ralsei is a real person who deserves things and deserves to be loved and cared for and deserves to be themselves it's so good, so beautiful, so heartwarming. Susie's so great. And then, of course, we have the scene at the holiday house. And this is fucking insane. Chris tears the soul out of their body, throws it in a gift box, but then we as the soul get to leave the gift box, start moving around the vents, and interact with the world physically as the soul rather than as Chris. That was such a surreal feeling, but because it feels like our control as the soul has been so limited so far. Like, really, the only amount of control we've exerted as it, outside of battles, of course, is when we've been in the birdcage and we're able to, like, move around a pixel at a time. The fact that we can fly around the holiday house and interact with shit and eavesdrop on Asgore and Chris and the fact that Noelle and Susie pick us up is so surreal. Again, stuff like this I thought would only happen near the end game, where our control over the soul really starts to differentiate itself from Chris. And I'm glad it does, because I think it makes it a lot clearer to casual players what's going on here, that we're a separate entity from Chris and they don't like that we're possessing them. And goddamn, the Suzel content in this part of the game is fucking wild. You played it, you saw it, you know what's going on. They are so adorable. I love it. I love it all. Now, the fascinating stuff about this segment as the soul is all the shit you can eavesdrop on, like I already mentioned. First of all, you can eavesdrop on Chris on a phone call with someone while they're making chocolate milk. It seems like the words they're saying are broken up, like we're not hearing the whole conversation, but they're talking about how a sacrifice is going to be happening next week, seemingly having to do something with the cops, which might be why they took Undyne. The fact that Chris needs the soul to do something in particular, most likely to seal fountains and to seal titans, as we see later. Chris having the soul inside them is part of whatever plan they're conspiring. And then we find Asgore, and Asgore's like cleaning their toilet or something, like he's basically the holiday's maid. But then we get this revelation that he has a black shard that might be a shadow crystal. And this is really strange, because shadow crystals up until this point, they've been explicitly said to look like glass, basically. That being said, the knight's armor is completely black, right? Their armor and their sword. And then when Susie takes a chip off of their sword when you beat the knight fight, the black part that comes off is a shadow crystal. So are we to assume that the black thing Asgore has is also a shadow crystal, or is it something completely different? Does it have to do with the knight? Really unclear at the moment. And there's also, oh god, I haven't even talked about this. In the gacha machine in Chapter 3, when you put in 1225 into how many points you donate into it, 1225 being Christmas, of course, you get this secret where you find another gacha machine and like a little black shard of something comes out of that, and it feels like it passes through your hand, like you can't see your hand through it, and then you don't have a hand at all. I can't remember exactly all the text that it says, but it seems to imply that the black thing is also the thing that is see-through. I don't know, it's strange. It's strange. But it seems like Asgore has a shadow crystal. Not only that, but when you look inside Asgore's flower shop in the basement, you can see that he has like conspiracy boards pinned up and shit. In the church, Toriel talks about how Carol, Noelle's mom, is enabling Asgore with the shit he's interested in. And then in Carol's bedroom, where you can spy on Asgore, you see she has conspiracy boards pinned up as well. So it seems like Asgore and Carol are somehow collaborating on whatever conspiracy, whatever this conspiracy is. And if I had to guess, it's probably, has to do with Des. And Asgore has these lines about how it wasn't his fault and finally everyone will see and then they can be happy again. And there's been this long-standing assumption in the fandom that Asgore had something to do with Des's death. Not that we had any evidence for it, but it was sort of just an Occam's razor connection. Like there's this mystery and there's this mystery, put them together and they feel like one mystery. But we do have confirmation that Toriel does somehow hold Asgore responsible for whatever happened to Des, and that he's trying to clear his name. We'll have to see what happens with that in Chapter 5. But then Carol shows up, and Carol is fucking terrifying. The music that plays when she comes into the house, like the cold breathing sounds that play are so scary. Like immediately, you're like, this is a fucking villain that just walked in. She looks like the goddamn Grinch. and she hates that Susie and Noelle are hanging out, and she fucking kicks everyone out. Except, she puts her hand on Chris's shoulder, and she says, as you know, you are welcome here anytime, and you is highlighted in red. And that is so bizarre, because that implies that she's not talking to Chris, she's talking to us. But on the other hand, when Chris is talking on the phone, after Susie gets the guitar, I didn't even talk about that part, the code, one of the codes for the bunker is in Dessa's guitar, and Susie gets the guitar because she wants to play it for Noelle. When Chris sees that happening, they call someone, and the person says, I'll be right there, and that's when Carol shows up. So there is some spiderweb of allegiances happening between Chris, Carol, the knight, and the player. It kind of seems like the player and Carol are on one side, and then Chris and the knight are on another. Maybe they're all conspiring. Maybe Carol and the knight are the same person. But again, why is Carol talking to the soul before talking to Chris? Crazy stuff we do not have an answer to. And that's not even taking into account the shit that goes down in the weird route, but I'm going to save that for later. So anyways, once Chris and Susie get kicked out of the house, then it starts raining. They try to go home, but Toriel's at choir practice and she has the key, so they go to the church. Oh, and fucking, I say this as someone who really doesn't ship often. Really, like, the idea behind the ship tier list video with me and Snellinger is that neither of us really are involved with shipping at all. But I say this as a non-shipper. Azzy Pants has fallen, and Nice Pants is rising from the ashes. I'm telling you. Also, I was completely correct about Bratty catfishing Burger Pants, but now it's Nice Cream Blue Ears Man catfishing Burger Pants instead. So I'm excited to see where that goes. I hope they get together by the end. But finally, Chris and Susie enter the church dark world. And that is another one of my predictions that came true, but it was a pretty popular prediction, so I can't really take any credit for it. I predicted Caddy and Jockington would be in this world, and they sure aren't. But the beginning of this dark world was like an ascendant moment for me. Well, first of all, they see the knight in there. The knight throws some swords at him and makes him fall a big distance. Ralsei shows up, and Ralsei is acting strange, stranger than usual in this chapter. We'll find out why later. But when the gang's all together and Ralsei shows up, you start climbing these stairs and seeing pieces of the prophecy laid out. And the music that's playing, the first sanctuary music, is fucking transcendent. You see like all the, I forget what they're called, but the singing enemies in the background appearing as they go like, oh, oh. You're climbing the stairs, listening to this music, seeing the prophecy unfold, and it's like, oh, it's magic. It's magic! And this is where the story really starts focusing in on the prophecy. The fact that Ralsei did know the prophecy this whole time, but like I predicted in the Ralsei video, Ralsei was not telling us all of it. And we finally get to see the rest of the prophecy that presumably the world knows about. And there's not much revealed at the beginning of chapter 4, but it'll get a lot more relevant later on. But then fucking Gerson shows up. Gerson just shows up out of fucking nowhere and is the best character in Deltarune. I don't know how else to explain it. Wow. The arc that Susie has with Gerson is so fantastic. And it's funny because I think like the old master who like seems kooky at first but has like a certain way of teaching lessons and it can still do it. You know, I feel like it's a very tropey thing to pull. But Toby is such a good writer that there wasn't a second of disdain or I've seen this before that I felt in all of Susie's arc with Gerson. I thought it was so compelling. Gerson is a fantastic character. He's so funny. He and Susie are so sweet together. And the secret boss fight against the Hammer of Justice was a dream come true. Toby said that in Deltarune he wanted to sort of revisit some concepts that he couldn't in Undertale, and that's why the fight against Spamton Neo was essentially like the fight against Mettaton Neo that everyone wanted. And now we finally get to fight Gerson at his peak when he was the Hammer of Justice, the warrior. And the fact that his theme takes from Undyne's theme, from both of Undyne's themes, from Spear of Justice and Battle Against a True Hero, they're both incorporated into the Hammer of Justice's song is so great. Like, of course, Undyne's Spear of Justice would be based on the Hammer of Justice because she idolized him because he was a great warrior in Undertale's past. And then also the fight mirroring Undyne's training with Asgore. because Undyne talked about how Asgore trained her in the Royal Guard, and she worked and worked and worked against him, and when she could finally land one hit on him, he was so happy. And this fight is all about Susie trying and trying and trying to land a hit on Gerson, and when she finally does, that's when she gets the Shadow Crystal and the hammer from him. God, it's like fucking poetry! So really, everything with Gerson, I just found so fantastic. And before I forget, Jackenstein is adorable! Jackenstein is the best. I think Jackenstein might be the funniest fight in the game. You know, the production value on Deltarune is climbing so steadily, right? Sometimes you forget that this is the guy who made Undertale. And when I was fighting Jackenstein, I was like, oh yeah, this is Toby Fox. You're taking too long. Everything about the Jackenstein fight was hilarious. Jackenstein is so cute, so funny. So cool how he comes back later in the chapter to help you climb. Oh, and while we're talking about climbing, this might be something that like no one else in the world is talking about or cares about. I really like the climbing mechanic in this game. As opposed to all of the other sort of like overworld mini games you play in Undertale and Deltarune, the climbing felt really natural with the controls, and I kind of hope that they continue to implement that in future chapters. That's just me though. I don't think I've heard a single other person praising the climbing controls in Deltarune, but I thought it was really nice. I liked it. And of course it makes for a great climax where you're climbing the crumbling tower. But anyways, getting ahead of myself once again, once you find a knight, they escape through another great door into the other room of the church and you close the fountain. Oh, and while I'm talking about that, the fact that you can leave Dark Worlds through great doors is another big revelation. And it sort of disproves a lot of what I was saying about Castletown in my Ralsei theory, because as it turns out, sealing dark fountains is not the only way to leave them. Great doors represent doors in the real world, it seems like, and so when you go through the great door from Castletown to the Card Kingdom, obviously I think a lot of people already figured that was us going through the door from the closet to the classroom. But now we know that a great door can be an exit to a dark world, like when Chris and Susie walk through one at the end of chapter 3, they just exit the house, and then a great door represents a separation between two rooms in the church. So that's interesting. We now know that dark fountains can be left as long as you find the great door. But anyways, Chris and Susie seal the dark fountain. They're back in like the church entry hall, and the reveal that Gerson was actually, the old man was actually Gerson's hammer covered in his dust that Alvin had kept in his drawer is, I think everyone was assuming that, right? But the fact that Susie understands is such a good moment, because again, so many people were thinking that Susie just wasn't going to comprehend how Dark Worlds worked until later on in the story. The fact that she finds this and she understands what Gerson was, I think is such a good choice, because it makes for like such a gut punch for her character, and also sets up this mechanic for further on in the story, because now we're thinking, if Gerson could be resurrected by the fountain, Ralsei comes in later and says that fountains resurrecting loved one doesn't always work, but that absolutely sets up the possibility that other people will try to get resurrected with fountains in the future, like Noelle and Rudy, as I theorized in Seven Nights. And then another thing I theorized about comes true, and that is, against all odds, despite the entire theory being wrong, Susie does make a dark world in chapter 4. She reopens a dark world to find the old man again and ask Gerson how to get through the door. And the second sanctuary that you enter is so cool. I think the revelation that you can open another dark world in the same place, but it's not going to be the same because a different person made it, is so fascinating. It opens up so many possibilities for the future as well, because it's the same in many ways. It's a reflection of the other dark world, but so many things are different. I think the fact that Gerson couldn't come back to life in Susie's fountain maybe speaks to the fact that she really didn't know the person that Gerson was before he died very well, so her dark fountain couldn't really match the intent of the knight's dark fountain, which also lends itself to the knight being Des, because Des would have had Gerson as a teacher, so her love for him would have resurrected him in that way and made him a good teacher for Susie, I think. But this is also where we have to fight the Gerson statues. Then Ralsei comes and saves us, and Susie has the big crash out at Ralsei, because we're finally acknowledging in this story that Ralsei knows shit and he does not say anything. Official recognition that Ralsei is constantly lying through a mission. Official acknowledgement from Ralsei himself that he knows the prophecy. He knows things that are going to happen, and he keeps quiet because he doesn't want to upset people. Susie's anger at that is so real and understandable, but her understanding is also so beautiful and so Susie. I think. Susie's kindness is really coming through in these chapters, and the fact that she really does want to see the best in people, and she doesn't want to be angry is Susie and Ralsei grow so much in chapter 4, it's insane. Also, in the second sanctuary, we start seeing parts of the prophecy that become a little more relevant. The prophecy is listing out the heroes, and there's the first hero, the cage with human soul and parts, which, first of all, that could be referencing Chris or the vessel. We'll have to see. There's a third hero, the prince alone in the dark, or whatever it was. But here's the thing that a lot of people have been talking about on Twitter, and I think Spooky Dude may have released a video on it as well, so link in the description if he has. People are starting to suspect that Susie isn't really the second hero from the prophecy. The prophecy is out of order in Susie's Dark World. There are a couple different pieces of the prophecy that mention a girl, right? The second hero, the girl with hope crossed on her heart. And then there's another part that says, and last the girl, at last the girl. And you're supposed to think these pieces of the prophecy are talking about the same girl, the same second hero, but they're out of order. And the girl with hope crossed on her heart would have been talked about second, and then another girl is talked about at last. There's a fourth main character, per se, of the prophecy. And obviously, I think the popular opinion is that it's Noelle. But now we need to reckon with, is Susie the girl with hope crossed on her heart and Noelle the other girl? Or is it the other way around? Is Noelle the second hero? And Gerson's dialogue in his fight makes it all the more clear that Susie might not be one of the heroes. When she asks which character of Dragon Blazer she is, he says she's the dragon. And that's another revelation, that Dragon Blazers was based on Lord of the Hammer, was based on the prophecy. There's this whole theme of fiction derived from other pieces of fiction that threads its way all through chapter 4. That's really fascinating. There was already a lot of discussion that the plot details of Dragon Blazers would end up aligning with the plot details of Deltarune. But now, not only do we have confirmation of that, but we also have the fact that these aren't one-to-one copies of each other, they're adaptations of each other. Things change in adaptations. Things change to suit the medium or the story the new author wanted to tell, which is also what held Alvin back from writing the end to Lord of the Hammer. But I digress. Then there are other pieces of the prophecy that we see, like the Flower Man trapped in asylum or something. I think it says that, which seems to confirm, along with Gerson, that the flower shop is probably going to be the next chapter's Dark World location, and Asgore is probably going to play a major role in it. The heroes will see the Tail of Hell take crawl, and the Tail of Hell is like a bunch of circles together, and that, again, invokes Friend, I think, because Friend may or may not be a cat from Cat Pedders, one of Noelle's games that she likes to play, which are made out of circles. It's based on, like, an old PC game called Cats, I believe, and the cats were made out of, like, orbs. And so seeing a tail made out of orbs definitely calls attention to Friend. And then there's the part of the prophecy that depicts the angel, and we don't get to see that, but Susie seems disgusted by it. And the conversation I've seen on Twitter, I find really fascinating, is that we can't see it, and the screen where it should be depicted is black. And when the screen is black, you often see yourself reflected in it. So I think that lends a lot of credence to player angel theory. But enough about the prophecy. We get to the climax of the chapter, where we go into the third sanctuary to fight the knight again. And the entire build up to this is so cool. There's this especially poignant moment where Chris, Ralsei, and Susie, they're all walking against like the red wind of the night coming down on them, and swords start coming down, and they start switching places to take the swords for each other, so to protect each other from them. It's so touching. Of course, Toby Fox can pull off a power of friendship moment in the year 2025. It's just beautiful. And then finally, at the end of that and the really cool climbing segment I mentioned earlier, the knight creates a dark fountain inside the dark fountain we're already in. And we have been debating what would happen if you do this for forever. Would it just kickstart the roaring like that? Would it create another darker than dark world? What happens is the fountain becomes basically an egg. It develops a hard exterior, and a titan starts to hatch from the inside of the fountain. And we're climbing this fountain as the titan is hatching from it. It's so fucking cool. It's so cool. What a climax. It's insane. And finally, we fight the titan as the chapter 4 boss. And this is where I realized that there's no pattern we can expect from the future chapters with Deltarune, because we thought fighting a titan would be in chapter 7, maybe. We thought fighting a Titan would be endgame or possibly after endgame type shit. We're fighting a Titan in Chapter 4. There's no bishop, there's no chess theory, even though this is the church. We're fighting a Titan, and what a cool battle. The music is insane. You're like killing its spawn as they're coming to get you, or rather you're purifying them. And it seems like all hope is lost until Gerson returns. And fucking Gerson and Susie do a dual buster together and they fucking... Oh god, it's such a good moment. The music comes in with Gerson's theme. They start working together and then Susie decides to fucking slam dunk Chris into the Titan's face and purify it from the inside. What a climax. Holy shit. So cool. But it's not even over then. After the Titan is defeated, Susie runs forward looking for the old man. Ralsei doesn't get a chance to go before her because he's been trying to protect them from seeing the full prophecy this whole time. And then Susie sees the last panel of the prophecy, and we don't get to see it, but Susie shatters it with her hand, and her hand is bleeding. And Ralsei can do nothing but apologize because of what she's just seen. And Susie comforts Ralsei. Susie isn't succumbing to the despair herself. Susie puts her bloodied hand on Ralsei's face and tries to calm him down. What a moment. What an emotional moment between those two. Again, Susie and Ralsei grow so much in Chapter 4. They're my favorite characters in the game now, to be honest. And as Susie walks off screen and you talk to Ralsei, and you see revealed on the character portrait that there's blood on his face is so, it's moving, it's profound, it feels so significant, it feels vulnerable and imposing at once, and we get the fully honest truth from Ralsei that he's been trying to fight the prophecy this whole time, which I frankly thought the opposite of. I thought Ralsei was pro-prophecy. He says that he's hoped that if they were just nice enough that they could somehow change the ending of the prophecy, but that it seems to be coming no matter what, and we don't know what that is. Personally, there are a few routes I think it could take, and they all involve one or more of the Fun Gang dying. There's the idea that Susie would have to sacrifice herself, or that Ralsei would have to, or Chris. I think if the idea that Noelle creates the Angel's Heaven is true, I think there's the possibility that maybe they would have to kill Noelle, or maybe all three or all four of them have to die. It's unclear at the moment, but the text that reads on screen when at the Dark Fountain right before you seal it, it's maybe my favorite few lines in the game. Susie's smile, which seemed to defeat everything, shined on in front of you, and for a moment, it was as if all the darkness had been blown away. That moment, I think that moment cemented Susie as my favorite character in Deltarune. What a couple of lines. It was so affecting, and it really sets up the pieces for where the story's going from here. Because now we know that there's a prophecy. There are different allegiances working for different reasons, and we don't know them all, but we know that Susie and Ralsei want to change the ending. And we finally know that Deltarune's one ending that we've talked about for so long, it's not just a meta element, it's not just a clarification for the Undertale fans that this game isn't going to have one ending. It's a problem that the characters in the game themselves need to face. I think that's such a good direction to start taking this story. I can't wait to see where it goes from here. Then when Chris and Susie leave the church at the end, the song that plays is called The Place Where It Rained. It's raining somewhere else, but with Sans' theme removed from it, just the place where it rained. And I think if anyone doubted that Sans Undertale is in fact Sans Deltarune, I think the writing's on the wall here. And after that emotional climax, after all the feelings that this game has been forcing you through, you get home and the jitterbug scene is happening. And let me be real with you, I was a bit... I was so upset about this scene, I accidentally caused a Twitter discourse over it, I fear. Because, so first of all, the Sorial of it all is great. You know, Sans and Toriel, great couple. Very funny to see them dancing like that. I think my opinion of Toriel's parental skills went from 100 to 0 in that moment. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that, I hate Toriel now and Toriel's a bad person. But, the facts here are, Toriel's child has been out since before the storm started. It is past 1 a.m. You know that from the soundtrack names. They have not communicated with you at all in all of this time. And you're home getting drunk with the grocery store man you met 2 days ago. Is that not insane? I feel like a lot of people are shrugging it off like, yeah, let a single mom have some fun, whatever, who cares? I don't care that she's dancing with Sans. She can dance with Sans and get drunk all she wants. The fact is she has not communicated with her child, and she knows that there's a goddamn tire slasher on the loose in the neighborhood. It's jarring, and to the game's credit, I think it's supposed to be very jarring, especially Susie reacting to the fact that Toriel's drunk and wanting to leave. I think that's pretty indicative of the kinds of problems she's facing at home, and I truly hope that the game addresses this moving forward, because I appreciate it. I like that Toriel's flaws are coming to the surface here, because she does feel like sort of infallible at points, and the fact that she's done something this callous I think is really fascinating and a good step for her character. And then Chris goes to bed, and God, maybe this hit too close to home for me as like a kid whose family was often too loud when they were trying to go to bed, but when Sans and Toriel kept making noise while Chris was trying to go the fuck to sleep, I got mad. But it ends with Chris looking at Susie out the window and with a voice coming from Chris's phone again saying that they promised. They promised something. What a cliffhanger. Is it the night? Is it Carol? We really don't know. Are they the same? What did Chris promise? Chris's promise has to be what led them to make the fountain, but what's the goal here? Are they happy about what they're doing? So many questions. So many beautiful questions. So many new questions. So many old questions answered, and so many new questions that I can't wait to start thinking more in depth about. Next, I wanted to talk about the egg rooms, because the egg rooms these chapters are fucking bizarre, especially chapter 3's. And this was another place where my expectations were just thrown out the window, because, honest to God, I thought the egg rooms would continue to be the exact same shit every chapter. Just like a room between rooms and a tree and an egg, and that's it. But these two egg rooms offer so much more than that. First of all, let's talk about how to even get to the chapter 3 egg room. So all the way on the left of the map in Chapter 3, there's a little mini-game where you have to switch X's to O's as Lancer, but there's just this random block sitting there, so you have to switch to Susie, who has the throwing ability, and then throw that block over the river on the right side of the screen in the game. But that's all you do there. Then later, on the far side of the map to the right, there's this spotlight that leads to a treasure chest that has like 1 point in it or some shit, and it feels super out of place. So when you walk into this spotlight, a remote guy jumps out and he asks where you were trying to go, and if you answer nowhere, then he takes you to a place, I guess, called Nowhere, where there's another game to play. And this actually really frustrated me on my first playthrough, because I found Nowhere, but I had already beaten the Mantle side quest at that point, and once you do that, all the games get shut off and you can't play them anymore. But anyway, you play this game with a Bibliox, an enemy from Chapter 4, for some reason, and you're able to find the ticket that one of the Pippins is, earlier on, alludes to. You check this ticket in your inventory and it tells you to go left at the X or some shit, and then if you go find a Ribic enemy and get in a fight with it, I think the blow all action, the one that Ralsei helps you with, the way these things normally work is like if there's an act you can do that is the same as a normal act but it works on a whole group, it's blank X. But now the X in the name of this act is red, and you hold left here, and then you show up at this Game Boy ass place. So right away, it's just fucking bizarre. I understand that the egg room in Chapter 1 it took some luck to stumble into for the first time, but once you know where it is, it's relatively simple. This one has you jumping through goddamn hoops. And you find yourself in this place called Man Country, where there are 6 tiny Rudens just hanging around, and they tell you that their backstory is they're the 7 flying aces, because apparently Chris, when they were a kid, they were bad at card games, so they copied 7 aces, or 6 aces, I guess. They weren't good at counting, apparently. But they photocopied 7 aces to win at cards, and apparently they're all different colors because Chris colored them in. Interesting that there are no green ones now that I think about it, considering the whole green crayon thing. But they say that copies are naturally gray, but Chris colored them in. And that definitely makes my mind wander to Goners. I've been thinking about Goners a lot lately because of their all save video and saying that copies are gray, but you can color them in. That's kinda, it does something, you know? But anyways, after walking around this place, when you go up, you finally get to the tree for this chapter, and the Eggman finally has a name. I mean, it's not a name per se, but we can call him something other than Eggman. He is the Forgotten Man. And all of a sudden, we know so much more than we did about the Eggman, and it still feels like we know nothing. So apparently, the Forgotten Man has been trying to contact Chris about something, and it seems like momentarily meeting him in each chapter and getting an egg from him is his way of communicating with you, but here in the Forgotten Land, or Man Country, or whatever it's called, this is the only place he can talk. This place that I guess is between the couch cushions. And he gives you these cryptic hints on where else to find the eggs in the other chapters, and he hopes to see Chris again. Oh, and it seems like the Forgotten Man is the person who wrote the mysterious Valentine's letter. And I gotta take the L on this one. I really thought it was Gaster, and people just didn't want to let Gaster be a little silly. But the way he talks, beyond a shadow of a doubt, I think indicates that the letter was from him, and that he somehow is aware of the program Deltarune. Not the religious symbol in universe, but the program itself. And then in Chapter 4. This one is a lot less complicated to get to. You just have to... It's another back and forth between two rooms, but this room is considerably more hidden than the other rooms, I feel. But when you go in, it sees Chris entering what seems like a hospital setting, and there's another one of these tiny Rudins there at the desk, once again referring to itself as a copy. And they can go into this room, and it's completely black, but there's shit to check on and talk to in the room. And it seems like this is art therapy. This was foreshadowed in the Spamton Sweepstakes too, but seeing the full context now, it definitely seems like Chris experienced something traumatic in their childhood and they had to go to art therapy for it. Something in particular that really caught my attention is that you talk to an NPC in this black room and they say, welcome to Welcome to Art Club, where we draw and don't kill each other. And that line about not killing each other has me really thinking. Because the implication of this room is that Chris saw something behind a tree, and they're trying to draw it, but they just can't get themselves to do it. And they draw and draw and draw, and the thing they end up drawing is just a gray smudge, but then they end up painting a tree over it. So there's a lot to connect here about, the bunker, lost where the forest would grow, the kids followed the pointed tail. But this detail, where the NPC says, we don't kill each other here, is really sticking with me, because to me it feels like it indicates that Chris had some sort of violent episode as a child, or maybe violent tendencies in general. Especially because Aram in Chapter 3 make a comment about how the knife grows dull without play, and how Chris is secretly enjoying the things we're making them do on the Weird Route. Oh, and I haven't even talked about the Weird Route yet, that'll be next. But it would seem that the Forgotten Man is trying to help Chris remember something that happened in their childhood. And I think there's more theory to be crafted around this whole subject, but that's all I got for now. It is so strange. It's so exciting that it's so strange. And now let's talk about the Weird Route. There are a lot of small changes across the game, and I'm not confident that I know them all right now, but the big change happens in Chapter 4 in the Holiday House segment, and it's disturbing. It is frankly... It's strange because it doesn't have as much of a profound effect on the events of the chapter as it does in Chapter 2, but I'd argue it's even more horrifying. You get this scene where when Chris gets off the couch to go look for the code in Noelle's house, Noelle actually ends up following them because she wants to talk to them privately. And so they go into Noelle's room and sit on the couch together while, again, the soul is discarded and trapped in the vents. But Noelle starts talking to Chris about this thing that happened last night, apparently, where overnight Chris showed up at their house, independent of our control, of course, and apologized to her and told her it was all just a joke, that they're sorry for taking her watch and that Birdley's going to get better. And Noelle says that Chris spoke to her in their normal voice for the first time in a while. And that paints such a heartbreaking picture for Chris's reaction to the Weird Route when we can't see them, that they did everything they could to correct what happened. But then Noelle asks Chris if she can talk about something else, and we're given the choice, please don't, or proceed. And by clicking proceed, because your soul is in the menu on the bottom of the screen, when you click proceed, then it is now out of the vent and back in the room with Noelle and Chris. And here's where the weird romantic implications of the weird route especially start coming into play. Noelle's eyes are closed and she starts inching closer to Chris on the couch as she talks about something else that happened last night, how they took her hand and they pulled a thorn out of her finger. And I think part of why Noelle's eyes are closed are for the sake of convenience, so she can't see as you pilot the soul back into Chris's body, but it's hard not to read as if there's sort of a romantic moment she's trying to manufacture between them. And when she gets really close, she mentions that Chris last night told her not to mention that they did any of this. And Chris starts to freak out and tries to cover her mouth because they know that we're listening to the conversation and we're not supposed to know that Chris did all this last night, but Noelle keeps talking. And she asks who Chris thinks is listening, and finally you get the option to respond with me. And then the fucking scene, like the room is tinted a different color and Chris's hair blows back and the tables are turned all of a sudden because now Noelle is backing away from Chris on the couch and Chris is inching toward her as she realizes that now she's hearing the same voice that she was hearing from them during the weird route. And I just want to put a quick content warning out there right now. I'm very briefly gonna discuss themes of sexual assault, so if you're not into that, then just go ahead and skip to the time code on screen. But as Chris is inching closer to her on the couch, we can hear Noelle's thoughts just like we could in the weird route, and we're able to respond out loud to them. And she starts thinking, well, if you can hear me say this and you say that, and you tell her that everything that happened was real. And then finally, when Chris has cornered her on the other side of the couch, they take the thorn out, which Noelle recognizes as the thorn ring, and they stick it back into her finger. And as this happens, the screen goes black, and some really interesting imagery happens on screen. When the game first came out, a rose appeared on screen, and the petals started to fall off. And to a lot of the fan base, and honestly to me, this does read as a metaphor for sexual assault or otherwise some sort of invasion of Noelle's boundaries or the loss of her innocence. But a few days later, the visual was then changed. So instead of the rose with the petals falling off, now there's this sort of red glass shattering effect across the screen. Both are very powerful in different ways, I think, but I can't help but think there was some intent to the original imagery. If I had to guess why it was changed, I think a lot of people were interpreting it as literal sexual assault happening, and I don't think that was true of the scene, but I think that the insinuation was pretty clear. I mean, especially with, again, Snowgrave is, thematically, it has a lot to do with forcing Chris and Noelle, regardless of their queer identities, into like a heteronormative relationship with each other. So having Chris approach Noelle on the couch and then forcibly penetrate her with a sharp object, along with the rose visual, I think it was a very intentional, like, deflowering metaphor. But again, I don't think that that's literally what happened. I think that it was more a symbol of how horribly Noelle has been violated and her loss of innocence and all that. I don't think it was literal sexual assault. But either way, I think that the new visual is also very affecting in a similar way, so it's similarly dark but without the potential for misinterpretation. What a scary scene. It was very affecting to me when I first played it. It's very uncomfortable, and it's interesting because I think the fandom had a few interpretations of how the weird route would continue to play out. I think like the more casual side of the fandom assumed that we would continue to find ways to be killing people. Like there was this popular theory that instead of using Noelle to freeze enemies in Chapter 3, Toriel would be our partner, and then we'd be using her to kill people with fire or something like that. And then there was also this more deep into the fandom interpretation that, you know, Noelle is, because of her history with breaking games and finding glitches and whatnot, she was sort of our vessel to find ways to break the game and therefore break away from the prophecy. And I still think there's a good chance that finding a way to subvert the prophecy is the purpose of the weird route, but it's not so much focused on Noelle's ability to break the game or find secrets. It's just about this horrible control we're exerting over Noelle. And that's made especially clear in a few other scenes later on in the route. In the scene in Chapter 4 where Ralsei asks Chris to close their eyes and think about Susie, if you choose to think about Noelle instead, you just see this red pixel slowly moving around on the screen, almost like it's breathing, and it just says, "Thank you." And then at the end of the game, when Chris is lying in bed, they get another phone call, and it's from Carol, and she says that Noelle is excited to see them at the festival tomorrow. So it seems like at this point in the route, we've completely taken Noelle's agency away. It seems like she's just a vessel for whatever purpose we're working toward at this point. I've also heard some theories that the red pixel is supposed to represent a growing red soul inside of Noelle, so that maybe one day we'll be able to control her. It's all very unclear at the moment, but it's harrowing. It's harrowing stuff. And the call from Carol also calls into question, why doesn't this phone call come across the same way as the phone calls Chris was getting in the holiday house? When we're spying on Chris, you see this little speech bubble coming from the phone. You hear the words broken up. Meanwhile, at the end of the game, you're in the cage, you're still separate from Chris, but the phone call that they get is in a normal text box. So are we supposed to assume that the person Chris was talking to on the phone is different from Carol for this reason, or not? So the last thing I wanted to touch on here is where I think my theories stand in the current Deltarune theory meta. I'll be the first to say it. Well, I guess I'm not the first to say it. The comment sections for my videos have become extremely toxic since the chapters came out. But, Seven Knights is in fact dead in the water. There's no saving it. Seven Knights is over party. That being said, there are still things that I predicted in Seven Knights and Burger Pants Conspiracy that came true or still have the potential to come true, but the basis of the theory that Knight is a title and that there is no central knight to be the antagonist, that's wrong. I mean, we've met the Roaring Knight. They're scary as hell. But so far it seems like the predictions for the Dark Worlds are holding up. Obviously the church was a no-brainer, but I did predict that Susie made a Dark World in the church, even if just barely technically correct. But it's also looking like Asgore is going to be a major player in the next chapter, and the Dark World's going to be in Flower King. So I think that counts as a point for me. Also, like I mentioned before, my theory about the knight silhouette being obvious because of their horns came correct, even if not in the way I thought it would. I also think that my theory that Noelle will be the quote-unquote angel that opens the angel's heaven as a Dark World is still pretty likely. There is a lot of evidence in these new chapters that point toward player angel more so than Noelle angel, but Noelle's associations with the angel have not gone away, and I think it's very possible that there doesn't have to be just one angel. Thinking back to Undertale, even now we don't really know exactly who the angel in the prophecy was, right? Depending on your interpretation, you could say it was Frisk, or Kara, or Azriel, or even the player in that case. So even if the player is the angel, I don't doubt that Noelle could still take on a symbolically representative angel role. Perhaps it would be different depending on the route, or maybe they both are. Especially with the revelation that dark fountains can be used to revive loved ones, I think that Noelle making a fountain to revive Rudy near the end of the story is very, very likely. We also have the fact that multiple people are confirmed to be opening Dark Worlds in this story. Like I said before, Susie did it, but Chris and the Knight seem to be on the same team, and they're both opening fountains for the same reason, so it's always possible they're not working alone. And Tenna has this really confusing dialogue where, toward the end of the chapter, when you play it without doing the Mantle side quest, Tenna mentions that the Roaring Knight would get people to watch him if he just kept the heroes busy for a while, but when you do the Mantle side quest, there's also a bit where Tenna is pleading with Chris not to kill him because he did everything they asked him to do. So that calls into attention if Chris is somehow also going by the Roaring Knight, or if they were just acting as a messenger of the Knight. But overall, it was nice while it lasted, but Seven Knights, goodbye. I appreciate you making me a YouTube micro-celebrity, but we're over. Meanwhile, though, I've been getting just as many people commenting on the Ralsei theory saying it's dead, but I honestly don't think so. I mean, of course, we have to acknowledge the fact that Ralsei immediately comes out and says that he's a Darkner, but that is really the only evidence against the theory that the new chapters supply. The reasons why I propose that Ralsei can be at least a normal Darkner still do apply, and all the reasons why he can be a Goner are still there as well. The thing we have to reckon with, though, is if Ralsei is a Goner, why would he say that? And there are three possibilities, I think, at least in my mind. Number one is that he's just lying. I put a lot of emphasis on Ralsei lying through omission rather than lying through explicit falsehoods in the theory, and so this explanation is my least favorite, but I just want to include it for completion's sake. Ralsei does confirm himself that he is lying through omission a lot in Chapter 4, and I think that his conflicted emotions about being a Darkner do seem genuine, so I don't think he's lying about being a Darkner, but I don't want to completely write it off. But the second option that I'm pretty compelled by is the idea that maybe Ralsei doesn't know what he truly is. Maybe after being created by Gaster, he was told he was like a regular Darkner, so he doesn't know the true nature of what he is. I do think that could be interesting for his character later on, but we also do have to reckon with the fact that a lot of Darkners tend to know what real-world object they are. For example, Queen knows she's a computer, Ram knows he's a power strip. So if Ralsei was the only Darkner who didn't know what object he was based on, that would be a little confusing. But that brings me to the third point, and the one I think is most likely. Something that I failed to consider is that maybe a Goner could just be a different type of Darkner. Just like a special kind of Darkner, you know? So even though he technically is a Darkner, him not specifying that he's a Goner is once again an act of lying through omission, not going into explicit detail on the true nature of what he is, which makes it feel the most likely to me. And I think a Goner being a special type of Darkner could actually work out in a few cool ways. For example, maybe the difference between a colored and a non-colored Goner is whether it's in a dark world or not, right? Like say a Goner in the light world is just an empty gray vessel that's not alive, but then putting it in a dark world makes it come to life and gain color. I think that could be pretty interesting. But also the last segment of the Ralsei video that's completely tied to Seven Knights, that's just out of the window, which is a bummer. I was very happy with the way that last segment hit, but oh well, you can't win them all. And that's all I have to say in the new chapters, I guess. I really can't overstate how much I loved them, and I love being a fan of Toby Fox and Deltarune and being in this fandom. It's just been a blast, all the discussion and new theories and whatnot. I can't wait to see where things go from here. As for my channel, at the end of the last video, I talked about how my next theory would have been the theory that connects Gaster and Des, and also Deltarune and Undertale, and that I would have to reevaluate where that theory holds up in the modern day once the new chapters come out. My thoughts on Deltarune and Undertale's relationship remain untouched, I think. I don't think any major dents were put in that theory by the new chapters, but obviously there's a lot more to consider regarding Des nowadays. I'm not completely sure if the Gaster and Des portion of the theory is broken, but it does need to be rethought. So I'm not sure right now if I'm going to split the Gaster, Des, and Undertale Deltarune theories into two videos, or if I still find a way to sort of make them this one cohesive thing. The title that I actually settled on for that combination of theories is Unrelated, with a question mark, because Unrelated is an anagram of Undertale and Deltarune, so I thought it was kind of clever. So hopefully the Unrelated theory will still come out originally how I intended it, but before that happens, because I'm going to have to do a lot more thinking on it now, there are going to be a few more videos on this channel that aren't the regular theory fare. Next up is going to be another collab with me and Snarlinger. This time we're going to be ranking dead theories that were put to death by chapter 3 and 4 coming out. And then after that, I actually have a character analysis video that I really want to make. I won't say what character it is now, but it's going to be shorter than the average theory video, but hopefully close to the regular production quality of a theory video. So look forward to that. And then after that comes out, I think I'm going to start working on Unrelated. So thank you so much for listening if you got this far, and now I have some Patreon shoutouts to do. And good God, there are way more of you than last time. Thank you all so much. The Ralsei video brought in so many new subscribers. I really appreciate it. Doing this is such a dream. First of all, thank you to my $3 patrons, the Little Freaks, including Allison Parker, Ampharose, Ari, Avery Martin, Batwake, Bolty Bolt, Brody, Citizen Dog, CJ+3, Cooper Bellows, Crytype Encrypted, Cryptic Encrypted, David Rendell, Dear God, Derphaven, Duck Quack, E-God, Elliot Thomas, Guest B the Default Me, Ethan Wiederspan, Eve Damos, Faith Bassett, Georgia, Hannah Nelson, different from the last Hannah, just to be clear, Hilltop, I'm Bowza, I'm Jabe, Irupop, Jessica, Joe, Jonathan Clark, Jordan DC, Lame Cinnamon, Lilin, Litch or Something, Lukerfuffle, Madeline, Maru, Medicine Seller, Merritt Stein, Moib, Paisley Salts, The One and Only, Payma, Pinku, Rom Hack Eater, Rose Tasma, Shane Delbin, Spencer Folkhart, Stephen Allen, Supporting Goat, See, this is why I have the page where you clarify how to pronounce your name on the Patreon. V, Weebo, Wheelie Scoot, Winter, Whoopie, and Yanus Z Yanosik MB. Yanus Yanosik MB. And thank you to the Average Freaks, my $5 patrons, including Boolet, Clown, Ellie is Gay, Exori, Fossil Hunter, Juicemated, Lady Edekin, Leo, Maycat, Marshall, Momo Sweet Peach, Mothbites, Nova Deluxe, Spoo Cow, Storm, T-Pat, The Witch of Art, The Awesome GN, Toady Boy, Totally Human Productions, Visible, and Weirdo's World. And thank you to the Huge Freaks, my $10 patrons, including Void Teeth, Cracked Vinyl, Gay Dad, Mesmer, Muffins, Orange Julian, Quimo, and Shrog Dog. And as always, a huge thank you to the bafflingly generous patrons of the joke tier, Tybee Fitzhugh and Chaos. Thank you all so much. Hope you enjoyed me rambling for an hour and a half. And hopefully I'll see you all soon. Love ya. Mwah.